This next panel is about investing in Europe's security. It's an urgent topic. As Russia's incursions into NATO has made it clear, Europe must invest in its security at scale. So in this panel, we have three amazing investors. We have Kerry Baldwin from the Ministry of Defense, Chris Magazzeni from Lakestar, and Alexander from Keen Venture Partners. And here to lead the discussion is Iain Martin, senior reporter at Forbes. Bring him on out.
Hi there, my name is Iain Martin. I'm a senior editor with Forbes. I write about tech, startups, and defense. This time last year, this was a brand new event, but already we're on track this year to see like a record year for investment in defense investment already. I think Dealbook is tracking for this to be around 2.3 billion. Just to give some context, that's up 500% versus where we were 5 years ago. But clearly, still a lot more money is needed. So maybe just jump in with Chris, who's like one of the largest tech investors in Europe with investment funds, Lakestar. Can you tell me, where is the need? What do we need here in Europe in order to move forward the defense ecosystem?
For sure. It's great to be here. And I mean, we've heard over today and over yesterday, and it's nice to be here as well in the context of being here last year, which was a huge success already. I think the mission statement is pretty clear, which is that we were lucky to have a 30-year period where defense and security was relatively relegated to the sides, and we had this peace dividend in which much of society could have taken a step back and stepped away from the whole thing. I think that situation has pretty clearly changed. Not only has warfighting changed immensely, but it's also on our doorstep right now. So I think what's exciting and the prospect for the opportunity here is the fact that a lot of other people, including the work that we're doing, but others as well, are realizing this opportunity on a continental level and are getting involved. From our perspective, we've certainly been doing this for a long time. My boss, Klaus, has been investing in the space since the late 2010s. And since then, rather quietly, we've built the largest defense tech portfolio in Europe, which soon we'll be able to talk a little bit more about, but it's been reassuring to also see a lot of other players join in as well, and those companies do very well as well.
Interesting. You've kind of raised the point about sort of bringing more people into the conversation here in Europe. I think, when Daniel Ek made his investment into Helsing, that caused somewhat of a backlash, that caused quite a lot of controversy. Has that discussion changed? And how do we engage with more people within the system?
I think it's definitely changed, and I think we heard it from the last panel with Miko. There are more and more, and with Lorenzo as well, there are more and more new funds being dedicated to a defense. I think the interesting dynamic that we've seen is you've got these new emerging managers setting up new funds that are dedicated and understanding how to do this with LPA restrictions being lifted, the path towards dual use, towards then defense plus weapons as well being kind of trodden quite well. And you also see a lot of American funds investing in European defense companies and pouring quite a lot of money, given that they never had those structural barriers to begin with. So I think we're seeing that unlock happening live. We're seeing a lot more players come in, which is nice.
Interesting. Maybe we can jump to Kerry. Kerry's been investing in deep tech since, I think, the late 90s with IQ Capital. It's encouraging that we do have money flowing into innovation, but that's just kind of one piece of the puzzle. I think you'd be kind of working on how to kind of engage with other parts of the kind of financial services industry in order to kind of scale some of the products that are being invested in or built by people in this room. How is that conversation going?
Yeah, I think this is a really important part of the discussion. We've heard a lot over the last few days about innovation and venture capital. So venture capital is that very early stage, taking that risk. But there's more types of capital that are going to be needed to actually address the wider defense problem. So starting from those early family offices that often take really important risks and are able to be a little bit more long-term in their aspirations, protecting and building that deterrence for their future. Then you take that venture capital, We'll take risk. We're looking for outliers, so we're prepared to take a lot of risk. And some of those ventures that we invest in won't make it, that risk that we've touched on all throughout today and yesterday. And then you go on to the next group, and that's the growth investors. And we've talked about that scale-up and growth gap. Now, they've got a few more demand signals here. They've probably got contracts, and there's quite a few of those, but we need more of those growth funds. And I'm aware that there's a lot of those funds trying to be raised right now, so really do support those. They will have data points. They won't look like traditional venture growth funds with lots of contracts, X, Y, and Z. It will look a bit lumpy, but take the risk. That capital is really needed. But then, going to your point, we look at the next stage. That's called mid-market. Now, we haven't heard mid-market actually mentioned yet, I don't think, over the last couple of days. So mid-market is something like an investment fund that invests in Hovis, or a big guttering factory that manufactures lots and lots of guttering, plastic guttering. They're going to be absolutely critical for investing in a lot of this problem, the manufacturing base. And then you go up to private equity. Now, private equity has actually been investing in this space for a lot longer. It has pedigree, but we need to really mobilize that capital. And then you've got pension money, and that's going to be really important to unlock, and we may touch on that if that's space later. Underlying all of this, we're going to need debt, banks. This is a critical piece of the ecosystem. Now, each part of the problem that we're trying to solve in defense and national security, each will need a different type of investor with a different type of return profile, looking for different signals. And that's what I might touch on later if there's time in terms of that pension money and how we need to think about unlocking some big debt capital too.
Maybe just jump in a little bit further. Like, what can sort of people in the room learn from like how private equity has approached defense investments?
Everybody brings something slightly different. So when you're making an investment, I always like to say, are you the right fund to be taking that investment? I'm not here just to be chasing returns in this sector and chasing the best deal. Are you the right person? Can you honestly say to that founder, I can give you something better than another fund. This is the area of expertise, whether it's the adoption piece, whether it's really helping them with the talent problem, whether it's helping them with the next round. Are you really the best investor? And if you're not, don't take the whole round, syndicate and bring somebody in alongside you that can give that founder what they need beyond just money. And this is where private equity plays really well. As those companies start to massively scale, they're going to need different funding options and products that private equity does all of the time to actually articulate a lot of this and to fund the different problems. But they bring in very experienced teams that have manufactured over and over again. They understand the playbook for scale. And because they've invested in this space in the US and Europe as well, over time, they actually know what is needed at that really far end of manufacturing and the data points and the quality of teams that are going to be needed to really sustain and potentially endure as well. They have that capital, but it's different expertise for different bits of the problem. And if you're a fund and you honestly don't think, and I repeat this point, that you can really give that company something, like we've heard from John at NATO and how he can work, like we heard from everybody at NSIF yesterday and the fantastic things they do to bring through the pull-through to mission. And as we heard from, even HMDCC yesterday saying, look how open we're being and look how we're trying to help you. Make sure you're the right person for that fund, for that founder, sorry.
Interesting. So in terms of the kind of point about kind of scaling production, like sort of if we kind of have built products that work, have been tested, and like now need to be purchased by, I think, every nation in Europe and maybe beyond, like what does it take in order to kind of engage with those kind of partners and that capital that has experience? Are they purely financially motivated?
Is that me?
Yes.
Yeah, no, they're not purely financially motivated. So you'll have different exposure. VC are looking for that outlier. We're looking for that big return so we can give money back to our investors. As you move up towards the debt, you're looking at different financial returns. They just need a steady income on that one with dividends or however they want to, the interest payments, however you want to look at those ones. And as you look to mid-market and private equity, they're not looking for that 10, 20, 50x returns on multiples on exits. They're looking for steady. And especially that pension money. And and everybody's pension money works in a different system. And throughout Europe, there's been some fantastic unlocking of pension money recently, both into funds and also into direct investments as well. But that's the piece that we really need to be working on, and specifically in the UK as well. But there's been advances in pension money as well. Alex, you've had that recently as well.
Yeah, hi, my name is Alexander Ribbink, nice to be here. Launching a dedicated European Defence and Security Fund. We've got 2 other funds that have invested also already in defence and security, so we have a bit of pedigree there as well. And yes, we were fortunate enough to hear last week that one of the larger Dutch pension funds, I can't reveal the name because that's all being planned still, is committing 40 million euros into our fund, which allows us to do a first close probably at around the 140 million euros, which in a year's time is a good progress. And it's a great step for pension funds because they get a lot of grief in the Netherlands at least as well for not being A, supporting venture, B, supporting defense. And here we have a good example of that happening. And I think the justification is very clear and simple, and they've explained it like that to their policyholders, is to say, you know, let's assume that half our assets are in Europe, and if everybody agrees, political or not political, that those assets are not well defended, then we might as well join and make sure that at every level, to your point, pension money tries to play its role as well. By the way, for a relatively small fund like ours, to have a pension fund as an LP, it's 749 questions that we had to answer. If you're 15 people, that is a lot of questions and a lot of detail. And we do feel sometimes like we're promising to be the United Nations of the world if you look at the ESG questions as well. But we sorted it, and we've come together in a very nice place.
Had you tried to raise before from endowments or pension funds, and what was the answer then?
Well, we've been raising for, let's say, a year plus, and we've successfully raised from the European Investment Fund, who I must admit has been a very big sponsor and supporter of what we were trying to do. With the exception of weapons only, they've moved also in their definition of dual use from you need to have revenue in both defense and civilian, and now they're happy with the definition that we also pioneered, but others like us in the room have pushed that definition as well, which says, you know, we need defense first, maybe, and then a civilian application. So where we ended up, at least in our minds, is to say, unless civilian applications are excluded, a defense first and foremost definition is fine. So only weapons, kinetic is still outside of our current remit, but as we can all see, things are changing quite rapidly. And the closer one is to the east of Europe, the more open people are to actually change and realize that weapons themselves also need innovation.
Interesting. Maybe we can jump to Chris. That dual use is a kind of recurring topic at all these defense conferences, but like, has that conversation changed at all?
Yeah.
Are the LPs who are willing to commit to offensive weapons?
It's a great point, and just like we saw, I think this is like an exact instantiation of that transition from no defense at all to, okay, dual use, to, okay, we'll do defense, but we'll exclude weapons, to finally understanding that our duty is to protect our people, and we fail at that if we do not have the weapons necessary in order to do that job properly. And it doesn't reassure any of the warfighters if we can't give them kit that works really well at doing their job. So I think what's nice is that we are going down that path, and I think we will get to a point where we are comfortable with it. And I think, to Kerry's point, there are a lot of different cogs in the system. Everything from early stage venture is nice, then growth stage, then mid-market PE, then endowments, then the banks, and so on. All of those elements of the capital markets need to allow and understand that this is something that is no longer relegated to, it's not our job. But if we want to have that whole of society approach towards defense, we need to embrace all of it.
And building on that, I think, I mean, fundraising, as probably half of the room knows, is a painful and also an experience that makes you quite modest. But every time that we try and fundraise, whether it's with a bank, a pension fund, or anyone else, we're also helping this change in mindset of people that think that it's enough to have extra water in the house to build deterrence. But actually, there's a lot more that needs to happen. And only this morning at 8, we had a long call with another Dutch bank, 25 people in the room, And half of them asking the question, I hope you're not investing in drones type thing. And so and maybe particularly to the Netherlands, we're not known as pacifists, but we are known as a mediocre army. But it may be that, but we all have a role to continually, in a very diplomatic and open and transparent way, explain how defense and defense tech is both an opportunity and a necessity. It's an opportunity economically also for Europe, but also a sheer necessity, as we all know every day from the newspapers.
Maybe just jump in before I get to Chris, but has this conversation changed at all? Because we've gone from having the largest land war in Europe since the Second World War on our borders to having aircraft breaking into the airspace of several NATO nations, and also those nations seemingly not having a response to those intrusions. Have the events of the last couple of weeks, has that kind of changed the conversation at all, or has that kind of raised the temperature?
I'm happy to jump in. I think, yes, I sense from the kind of attempt to try and address this a few times, clearly not fast enough. I think we are getting there. I think in many ways, the Ukraine war, full-scale invasion definitely pushed people along a lot. Frankly, Munich this year pushed people a lot as well. And of course, this month, I'm sure we'll be continuing with that push in that kind of secular direction. I think it's clear, from a Lakestar hat point of view, we thankfully don't have that issue. We don't have those restrictions, and are able to invest in a wide range of technology. If it's good for the customer, it's good for us. I think from a UK Defence Investor Network hat, which is the other hat that I wear, we have template language for managers that they can go to their LPs. I think this is an education piece, like Alex was mentioning before, on how do we get people comfortable that there are naturally limits on what the customer can do as well anyway. Those are defined by ratified treaties that are passed by democratically elected governments. That is the way it should work. And if these sorts of things continue the push in the right direction, I think the more the better. But you're right, it needs to go a lot quicker.
And I think now is the time. So what you have here is you have all the signals that we've talked about here. But what we actually have to do is actually work together a little bit more. So part of the work we did in the UK on the pensions work, the debate had happened. We need to unlock pensions and get it into growth equity and venture capital. That was done. We'd all had the chat. We all knew that there were problems. But at some point, somebody and some group had to go in and actually say, right, this is now to the technical level, just like you've just said there. Here's an illustration of a term sheet. Here's an illustration of what you could say to your LPs. Somebody has to do this. And part of this work we did on the pensions work, we had all of the big pension houses sat with all of the big money and all of the trade associations that are vital in the debate. All of us came together and said, right, we had 100 technical experts underneath us and said, right, which bit is stopping this money flow? Right down to a permitted link, right down to somebody signing something in Swindon and didn't have the authority to sign. We had to unblock. This is the piece that needs to happen right now, and working together. And that's why these convening throughs and the fantastic work that Leslie and Toby have done, bringing us all today from all our different disciplines and yesterday to convene and talk, is fantastic. But now we have to work together. So I personally need all of the unblocking things that aren't working for all of the different stages, from venture all the way through up to the private equity and debt. We need to bring them together and just really work through all of those problems to unlock it. And that is what the DIAG will be looking at as well, some of those different investment opportunities there. But this is critical. By doing that and working together and with our NATO partners as well, we can actually start to really shift the dial and get the right money into the right problems, rather than just purely focusing on venture and innovation. There are big money that we need to mobilize. So if you in the audience have something that you can offer in this space, please catch me and find me or get in touch, please. She says as a little shout out, working together.
And building on this, I don't underestimate just the old-fashioned leadership of something. So
Yep.
We've got ABN AMRO who invested in our fund, 10 million, and there's a clear link between the CEO who thought that was a good idea and then helped, if you will, guide her departments to do the investment. Same has happened with the pension fund. It's clear that the board of the pension fund is pro And so it helped leading the organization. Whilst if we all go just bottom up, which is sometimes what happens, you get stuck in departments that live in cuckoo land sometimes still, or la la land, whatever country you're from, and then you get stuck in the wrong department.
And it's the parallels to for the founders on the panel this morning. We had, I think it was Jen, I think, is saying there were the 50 doorbells on the front door. It's almost like we're being 50 doorbells on the MOD or on the other systems and saying, hey, I've got a solution, hey, I've got a solution. Find that convening, work together, make it easy for the NSIFs and the other funds to actually pull through and decipher which is the technology that we all need to focus on or not, because a lot of money is going to be wasted otherwise.
What are the remaining kind of big blockers then? Like, I think there's kind of agreement around using public funds and sort of making more use of pensions, but like, what remains as a kind of blocker there? Why isn't this money flowing?
Go on,
Well, I mean, let's realize that, and again, I can't speak for every Ministry of Defense, but I know the ones that I'm more intimate contacts with, of course, are institutions that for the last 20, 30 years have been told not to spend too much money or not spend money at all, say goodbye to tanks, aircrafts, ships, whatever. So if you talk about culture and you talk about people taking risks or, you know, thinking openly about the future and embracing innovation, of course, you know, everything is changing fast. There's a lot more money coming back into them, but it's a changing culture. It's a change. So just let's take that into account. There is an old network still, which has a tendency to order more of the same that they used to, rather than, which I think is a very laudable strategy, if only from a vision point of view, what the UK has done, this 40-40-20, which gives us such a clear signal as to this is what we think the future could look like. And let's all move in that direction. Whether we end up with 50-50 or 60, it's not the point. The point is, this is the direction. So I think that's the point I wanted to make.
And Chris?
I think one of the big challenges as well when we talk about spend and what we're going to spend it on and so on, and we talk about that scale capital, I mean, even if we could click our fingers and get the 3.5% GDP spend today, what on earth can we deliver by the end of the financial year that will meet that spend increase? And there's a serious challenge, and you know, understandably, a lot of the industry hasn't historically been well adept at scaling that up very, very quickly. And I think one of the big things that we get wrong is that we overvalue how difficult it is from an innovation point of view to get from serial number 0 to 5, and massively, massively underestimate how difficult it is to get from 5 to 500,000 per year. And that, I mean, you know, of the many, many lessons that we should learn from Ukraine is the fact that that is one of the things that you can do, and you can do it quickly. And it is a combination of having a clear demand signal and a willing buyer willing to buy it. And finding the excellent people, the very few who know how to do that very, very well, and then allocating risk capital to them or at the appropriate stage from the appropriate place who know how to see this work and know how to get it done.
Yeah, I'd say another barrier is the size of the fund. So a lot of these big pension funds need a certain sized fund to deploy a 50, 100 million check, because, you know, if they're putting lots of 5 million checks, it's not how their model works. So size of funds needs to be considered. So we do need to see much more of those 500 million, 350, 500 million size funds coming through. And I think we're hearing a lot of those ones are being looked at in that scale-up function. And then talent. So talent is another problem here as well, which we must touch on, which is one of the things that's holding us back. How can we use all the fantastic operators and defense to guide startups and then help them actually progress a lot farther as well? And I think a lot of that inside VCs, you saw that lovely statistic. I'm not going to be able to quote the exact number, sorry, because I was sort of heading out, but the statistic that Lorenzo said, that just how many funds are starting up with people from the military backgrounds and people who really do understand this space and understand the challenges, but can also speak the language that's required for those startups. You can't just knock that door down and say, I've got the best technology, use me. You can go through some fantastic programs that are being set up. So talent is really important. And I think we're missing a trick there, how to utilize the talent a lot more into our startups and inside the funds. And I do like the people from this world actually being part of a fund and saying, hey, that's not the language we need to be using. That's not going to work.
Interesting. Alex, like what is your kind of, what would be on a wish list in terms of like unblocking investment into defense in Europe?
You know, it's more of a European dream of interoperability, giving low cost, high volume. So, and maybe it's because I'm from a smaller country and we see the larger countries, you know, being, let me put it in an unkind way, being quite happy with themselves and their politicians forcing them to buy locally. And I think if we were to think more like Europeans, you know, we would get better gear at lower cost. But hey, the smaller countries will have to team up with either a larger country or with other small countries. So interoperability / low cost, high volume, and being able to act, if you will, as the European part of NATO, just to put it in today's politically correct context, I think is critically important.
So a partnership, not just on the battlefield, but
Yep.
in the boardroom.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, if you hear the stories of the Ukraine getting 155 millimeters from us, and they're all slightly different. It pains the eye and it pains the mind that Europe as such is not able to make one kind of 155 millimeter grenade.
Who can resolve that? Ursula or von der Leyen, or like?
Anyone with money. I think money is the answer, i.e., and there could be the NATO Innovation Fund, could force interoperability, could force harmonization, I think the countries. But of course, the end is with democracy, so it's our politicians. It must be the answer. They must, and then sovereignty comes into play very quickly as well, immediately, of course. And then we think the goal, or we think whatever.
And then my parting request would be the bit that's keeping me up and the bit that I need to worry about is if we're needed to sustain or endure a war. Where's that money coming from? What type of money? What type of structures? So if anybody here has seen structures working in different territories or has ideas on that function, no matter how crazy they may seem, please share them with me and I can try and work through them. Sorry?
Lend-lease.
Okay, there we go.
No,
One.
Second World War.
Yeah, well, let's have a chat in a minute, obviously. But please do think about that. It doesn't matter how odd they sound. We can work through.
Very good.
Thank you.
Well, thank you, everyone. If we can round of applause for our delegates here. Thank you.
Thank you. Is that all right?